Hello everyone and welcome to our channel. Today, we're bringing you shocking news that has shocked both Russia and the entire world. Russian soldiers reportedly rebelled against President Vladimir Putin's government, which is a first. The implications of this development, which has sparked widespread panic across the country, are still not fully understood. Come explore this extraordinary crisis with us. To stay up to date with the most recent news, subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell before we continue. Numerous factors that have been simmering below the surface for years have sparked the uprising of Russian soldiers against President Putin. The soldiers are frustrated and disillusioned due to grievances within the military, including low pay and subpar living conditions. As a crucial pillar of the Russian state, the military demands unwavering loyalty and dedication from all of its members. The soldiers' morale has been damaged by the ongoing problems of low pay and poor living conditions, which has fueled a growing discontent that ultimately resulted in rebellion. Allegations of corruption within the military have added to the soldiers' resentment in addition to their internal grievances. High-ranking officials allegedly enriching themselves at the expense of the troops and corruption scandals have damaged trust and stoked feelings of injustice. The soldiers view corruption as a betrayal of their sacrifices because they bear the brunt of the difficulties and dangers related to their service. The endemic corruption in the military has given rise to dissent among its members. Additionally, the soldiers' involvement in conflicts abroad as part of Russia's military has put a tremendous amount of mental and physical strain on them. Their health has suffered as a result of the protracted deployments, contact with combat areas, and loss of friends. The soldiers' stress and trauma have influenced their growing disillusionment and desire for change. The military's capacity has been strained by the demands placed on it, which frequently causes the soldiers to feel overworked and underappreciated. These underlying tensions within the military, along with the external pressures and expectations put on the soldiers, have produced a tumultuous environment just waiting for uprising. The soldiers' sense of injustice and frustration has been fueled by a confluence of complaints about subpar living conditions, low pay, corruption, and the stress of military engagements. These elements combine with the need for change and the hope for a better future to serve as the spark that sparked the rebellion. As the rebellion takes shape, its size and structure imply that it is not just an unplanned outburst, but rather a well-organized effort by disgruntled soldiers who have carefully considered their course of action. There have been numerous protests and demonstrations in major cities as a result of the rebellion's resonance with some segments of the civilian population. The cooperation of the military and civilians increases the impact of the uprising and seriously undermines President Putin's authority. The Russian uprising is the result of years of frustration and disillusionment among the military. The complaints of the soldiers, coupled with claims of corruption and the stress of military operations, have produced a tense environment that has culminated in a historic challenge to President Putin's government. The implications of this rebellion are significant because it has the potential to alter not only the geopolitical landscape, but also the stability of the Russian political system. The world waits impatiently to see how this extraordinary crisis will affect Russia's future and its relationships with the rest of the world as events unfold. The Russian military's uprising against President Putin's government has quickly intensified, igniting a wave of unrest that has spread throughout numerous military formations and areas of Russia. What at first appeared to be a lone incident quickly developed into a large-scale movement, surprising both the government and the international community. When word of the uprising spread and soldiers from different ranks and branches joined the cause, the uprising, which had initially started with pockets of discontent within individual military units, quickly gained momentum. The fact that so many soldiers are taking part suggests that there is a high level of organization and coordination among the rebellious soldiers, proving that this is not an unplanned uprising but rather a concerted effort. The scale and scope of the rebellion expanded as it gained support from some sections of the civilian population and began to spread outside the military. Large-scale protests and demonstrations broke out in major cities as people demanded that the government change and expressed their support for the insurgent soldiers. The unrest in the country was further exacerbated and the sense of urgency increased by the soldiers and civilians' converging discontent. President Putin's authority has been seriously threatened by the rebellion's escalation. The government's initial response was to minimize the rebellion, characterizing it as a small disturbance brought on by a few irate people. However, as the uprising gained strength and reached more military units, the government became concerned to acknowledge the gravity of the situation. In some of the rebel-affected areas, the government proclaimed a state of emergency in an effort to regain control. To quell the unrest, more soldiers were sent to these regions and strict curfews were put in place. These actions showed the severity of the situation and the government's concern over the possibility of a further escalation while also attempting to put an end to the rebellion and restore order. Russia is now experiencing a climate of fear and uncertainty due to the rebellion's escalation. While the government was trying to regain control, its response also called into question the resilience and stability of President Putin's government. The rebellion's extensive influence and the backing it has received from both military personnel and civilians highlight how deep discontent and disappointment are within Russian society. Concerns about the effects on regional stability and the balance of power have been expressed on a global scale as a result of the rebellion's escalation. Due to its status as a significant global player, any internal crisis in Russia could have an impact outside of its borders. The situation is being closely watched by the international community, which is also analyzing its potential effects on diplomatic ties with Russia and how it may affect geopolitical dynamics. The Russian government has been forced to act to regain control and deal with the escalating unrest in the nation as a result of the soldiers uprising against President Putin's regime. The government's initial response was characterized by an effort to minimize the rebellion, portraying it as a minor disturbance brought on by a handful of disgruntled citizens. The government was eventually forced to acknowledge the gravity of the situation as the rebellion grew and spread. The government proclaimed a state of emergency in some of the affected areas after realizing the severity of the uprising. This declaration made it possible to take extraordinary measures to regain control of the situation and put an end to the unrest. In order to increase military presence and exert control over the disobedient soldiers, more troops were sent to these areas. Strict curfews and increased security measures were put in place by the government in order to exert more control over the situation. Curfews restricted public movement and sought to reduce the likelihood of additional protests or demonstrations. The presence of more security was increased in an effort to deter and stop any acts of violence or disturbances that might further destabilize the situation. Along with these steps, the government called an urgent meeting with senior military figures to assess the situation and come up with a plan to put an end to the rebellion. The topics discussed at this meeting most likely included grievances of the soldiers, potential negotiations, and de-escalation strategies. Internally, the government's reaction to the uprising has shown that it is determined to keep control and uphold the status quo. The government wants to show that it is strong and ready to act swiftly against any threats to its authority, which is why it has declared a state of emergency and sent out more troops. The government's response is not without controversy. It is important to remember that critics claim that the actions taken to put down the rebellion might worsen existing tensions and increase resentment among the soldiers and civilians. Curfew enforcement and a strong security presence might be viewed as oppressive and could potentially worsen the situation. The government's ability to effectively address the underlying problems and meet the demands of the soldiers and the civilian population will be critical in determining how the crisis plays out as the government's response to the rebellion develops. The government's actions and their potential effects on both Russia's internal stability and its relations with other countries are being closely observed by the rest of the world. Both domestically and internationally, the Russian military's uprising against President Putin has significant ramifications. Internally, the uprising might exacerbate already existing divisions in Russian politics and society, posing a threat to Putin's authority. This crisis could have significant geopolitical repercussions on a global scale, affecting the balance of power and regional stability. The country is now in a state of fear and uncertainty as a result of the Russian military's uprising against President Putin. The world is watching with great interest as the situation develops, eager to see how this unprecedented crisis will turn out. We'll give you regular updates on the most recent events. Please click the like button and share this video with others if you found it to be informative. That brings us to the end of today's video. Don't forget to hit the notification button and subscribe to our channel to get timely updates on this ongoing crisis. We appreciate your interest and hope to see you in the next video.